Unity Matters.
Hello, my name is Arnie Herz, and welcome to the podcast, Habits of a Whole Heart. And I'm here today with my longtime friend, Rob Resnick, who's going to share with us his wisdom on the concept of wholeness. And this is going to be a conversation. We're going to go back and forth, ask each other questions, explore the topic, because this is what Rob and I have been doing for the last 10 years. And I always find that in a conversation, you're able to bring out a level of richness and depth that you wouldn't normally have if you're just having a conversation in your own head. So, Rob, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
And joining me here today. Rob is a dear friend who has been on, I would say, a path of self-development or spiritual path to help become the best he can become. And that's how we got to know each other. And we've been having study session now every single day for quite some time. So, Rob?
Yes, yeah. Okay. Thanks, Arnie. And it's really a pleasure to be here with you. And I've seen the earlier podcasts you've done. I think you're doing a great job. You've been a great friend and mentor to me for many, many years. And I know you're in the middle of writing this book, and it's material that we've discussed to various degrees over the years. And so I'm really anxious for the opportunity to talk to you some.
And I think if you remember, Rob, I think it was during COVID, you came up with the idea of doing a podcast. And in fact, we taped a couple episodes.
We did, yeah.
You were the interviewer and I was the interviewee. But now in this format, and thanks to hmTv, we're able to have this podcast. And in this format, it's more of a conversation.
Yeah, that's great.
So you know about the book. It's called Habits of a Whole Heart, which is the same name as the podcast. I'm about 80% done. I've shared with you the core habits of what we've done. So I just want to ask you a broader perspective. When you think about the word wholeness, what does that mean for you?
That's a great question. And, I think just to kind of take a step backwards, I think that we're all very programmed to try to fulfill our needs and get what we want. And when you're young, you want to have money and you want to get married and all these things. And those things are certainly extremely important. And what I found throughout the course of my life is something similar to what David Brooks wrote about in the book, The Two Mountains. That in the beginning, that's what you do, but then you have challenges in your life, and then suddenly you start climbing the second mountain, and those are slightly different things that are goals for you. And so the things that have become more gratifying to me, when you talk about wholeness, I think about the things in my life that really have had more meaning for me and have actually made me happier in the long run, have been different kinds of things. And so when you talk about wholeness, for me, what that really means is feeling settled within myself, that the things I'm doing may be part of my own mission, which is to try to do whatever I can to make an impact on the world. And I can't say I'm out there nearly as much as you are. People know of you and the work you've done, but I've made it an attempt, mostly in these last few years since we've been studying Torah together, to try to think more about others and impacting others, and that gives me a sense of wholeness within myself.
Beautiful. And why does impacting others fulfill wholeness?
I think that it's a larger discussion about how, in some way, we're all connected with one another, and while our instinct is to fulfill our own internal needs, we are programmed to be a socialized people. And when you look at things from a godly perspective, in a sense, we are all connected in a certain kind of way. We have our own, our families and our communities and things like that. And I believe, and I believe this very strongly, that we're connected in such a way that when we do something that helps others, that it helps us, and that there is some downstream impact to things. It's like a ripple effect. When you do something and you reach out and you help someone, there's a downstream impact from that. And that eventually, the cumulative effect of that, I believe, has a very powerful effect on the universe and the destiny of humanity, certainly.
So when you talk about that, we're all connected, is it metaphorical or is it literal?
Well, we're obviously not literally all connected, but I know there's something that I hear you speak about a lot. In a sense, everything in the universe, it's pulsating energy, and in some way, we all share something in common with the entire universe. So while we're not physically connected, I think that there is a connection that, and it's part of what. Let me just take one step back and mention something. So, as you know, I was going to go to medical school when I was younger. So I never ended up doing that, but I maintained a deep interest in science and the mind and things like that. And it became more and more interesting for me to understand psychology and connections between people. And I had a very profound experience I don't think I've ever shared with you when I was in my 20s, when I have one sister and I'm very close with her, and she had a tragedy in her life that I won't speak of, and I had a dream that spelled it out. And there was no way for me to have known about that. And I only found out about it later, like maybe 6 months later. And I know that may sound a little bit scary to some people, but I do believe that that put me on the path of understanding that there are things that we don't know about that are way bigger than us that are going on. And I think that there is this connectivity, particularly among people that are close to one another, where you can kind of know what the other person's thinking, and that connectivity is the thing that we're talking about, I believe.
Right, beautiful. I mean, I think we see certain beings who are very holy beings, who are so in tune with the deeper energy of the universe and themselves and other people, that they're able to perceive this. We get glimpses of it. I think many, many people, similar to that situation you had with your sister with the dream, are able to tap into the larger consciousness that's available all the time. We're unable to do that because there's so much busyness of the mind and there's so much interruption that it's sort of like a radio signal. Right now, where we're sitting right now, Rob, there's literally thousands of radio signals, cellular phone signals pouring through this room.
Right.
And we're only able to pick up the very specific that we dial into.
Yeah.
Our phone picks up the very specific signal for our phone. But if we had a phone that was able to pick up every signal, you would realize there's so much more available to us. And I think, going to your question of whether or not it's metaphorical or literal, if we're connected, I think the answer is it's both. It's both, because not just religion has talked about this oneness, but science now teaches, we know through quantum physics, that all matter is at its core pulsating quantum energy that exists in and out of being in every single moment. And as a result, it's only because of the limitation of the eyes that I could see you, I could see the microphone, I see the camera. It's all because of the limitation of the eyes. If I wasn't limited and I could see anything, there would be nothing but pulsating energy. In that sense, there is no differentiation. We are connected. And that is what I often talk about as the godly soul. At the same time, I'm aware of me, you're aware of you. We do see things separate. So if I was going to say, well, everything is connected and I'm not separate from you, well, they put me in an insane asylum. Right. But if all you say is that we're separate and you're not aware of the connectedness, you're leaving yourself short. And so one of the things that I've mentioned in previous podcasts is, if you imagine the ocean, and the wave of the ocean hits a rock and splatters, and all of a sudden there's water spray. And each droplet of that water is a droplet. It has its own identity. It's formed, it exists for a period of time, and then it will subside back into the ocean. But while it's a droplet, it is both a droplet and it is nothing but the ocean. And so much of the work that I'm trying to do in my lifelong studies, and what I want to explore with you, is that the essence of a habits of a whole heart is to become aware of both realities that exist and give attention to the reality of oneness, to the reality of connectedness that we're normally not aware of. Of course, the separation we're aware of on a day-to-day basis, but it's the reality of the connectedness that we need to cultivate. And if I hear you correctly, when you are talking about David Brooks and the Second Mountain and making an impact to people outside of yourself, you're connecting to that part of you that's beyond you. And when you connect to that part that's beyond you, it naturally creates a sense of wholeness, of greaterness that's not limiting you. So what are your thoughts about that?
I'm smiling because what you said made me think about something we were talking about just before we came here today, which is how is it possible that small habits that you can develop every day end up changing who you are and how you are? And so what you said just now, it made me think about that. It made me think about the drop in the ocean and what that downstream impact is. And I was telling you a story which I think would be useful to describe on the air here about my own experiences and how things have changed for me over the last few years since I've begun developing habits such as studying Torah daily and having these kinds of conversations with you. So back about 6 years ago, my marriage was ending, and I lost my job at the time. A number of bad things happened at the same time. It was a terrible time in my life, and it was I became quite depressed. And I went to Rabbi Paul Thiel, who I know you've had on the show here. He's the rabbi from the Port Washington Chabad, just a dear friend, in addition to being an extremely wise and very warm and deeply committed person. And I told him my story, and he said to me, Rob, just do these things. And he told me a bunch of things to do. He came and put mezuzahs on my door. Since I was living alone, he said I could light Shabbos candles. I started doing it every Friday night. I started going to synagogue. I began studying Torah. It was just around this time that I started dropping in on you. You had just become Shomer Shabbos, literally like around that time, and I knew you were going to be home. Actually, you probably started the year before that, but I knew you were going to be home. So I started dropping in on you on Saturdays, and we would talk on Saturdays, and eventually we would also talk about the Torah portion of the week. And I'll never forget this. One week after doing that for several months, you said to me, Rob, I don't want to talk about anything else except Torah when you come here. Like, okay. And from that evolved this shiur that we now have that has maybe 6 or 8 people that sometimes come. Anyway, so these various things the rabbi said to just begin doing them. And I was at that point, I was not overly involved in religion, I would say.
So Rob, how have these things helped you? How does it connect to
So connecting to this bigger picture. Well, what I found personally, I would just explain this sort of what happened to me personally was, in very short order, many of the immediate challenges in my life actually resolved themselves, and it's hard for me to explain how that's possible. I ended up selling a house, which I was unable to sell. I ended up getting a job. My sister, who had breast cancer, was cured. All these things happened in a short amount of time. But in a longer sense, it's had a little bit more of a deep, enduring change to how I am and who I am. And I've become a calmer person, and I've been able to manage my life and my anxiety in a much better level way. So I just want to circle back to how I got into this particular discussion, which is what you were saying before. So I guess the question, and I want to also toss this back to you a little bit, is how is it possible that these things, these habits, how is it possible that these habits can have such a profound impact as they have with me? Changing things in my life, changing how I am, who I am. I have answers to some of those things. I'm going to ask you about some of the other ones, though. I can tell you one way I know it's changed me is that there is a Torah perspective that I know you've spoken about, which is that everyone is going to encounter challenges in their life. And when you encounter challenges, instead of looking at yourself as a victim, thinking, poor me, if you can push back and step away from it for a moment and try to look at the bigger picture and believe that, well, maybe there's some reason for this. Maybe God is in control and he knows what's going on, and maybe I can't see the benefit now, but maybe there is some real benefit to this. If you can step back and see it as a positive instead of a negative, and that's what I've successfully done. And I was mentioning to you one instance of this. I lost my job last July, and instead of being angry as I normally would be and frustrated, I really stepped back and tried to see how this is a positive in my life, and I did find a lot of positive things about it, and it just reframed the way I looked at everything. I just quickly quote something that you told me that Tom Brady said. He said, and I'm not using the exact words, but he said, when I'm playing a game, I can either lose or learn. And so everything that happens, there can be a positive to it. There can be learning that comes from it.
Yeah, beautiful. So I think you covered a lot of ground there.
Yeah.
And I think that what Brady had said was win or learn.
Much better.
And it was, he's constantly learning. He's constantly trying to improve himself. Certainly as a football player when he played.
Yeah.
Made him, the superstar forever. And it's a great attitude. I think going back, when you're talking about when you lost your job and some other challenges, and you asked the question about, these habits, the habits of a whole heart, and we'll get into them in some detail, reflects the deeper truth that's communicated through the wisdom of sages of various different traditions. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about the truth, what is the truth, right? You talk of and today in a post-truth world, in a post-factual world, it's like people say, whatever I feel is the truth. That's my truth.
Right.
But what we're talking about here is the truth of existence. It's true that I'm sitting here right now. And it's true that at some point I won't be here anymore. Meaning in this world. Of course, I won't be in the studio forever either. And it's true that there was a point in time where I wasn't here. The Arnie as we know it is a temporary existence, limited by time and space for all of us. This is the ultimate reality. That is a truth. It's also true, as we were talking before, that everything is nothing but pulsating energy that's connected, that there is no separation from that higher level. And it's also true that we know that this whole notion of time and space that we experience is not the ultimate reality. Science has taught us that. Einstein, that time is relative. And there's certain realities within the universe when light is moving at a certain speed where time literally stops. And there is no time. There is a realm of eternity that science has now been able to verify what the mystics have been saying since time immemorial. So these are the deeper truths that we're trying to bring forth and to apply them into our lives so that it's not just theory. And when you understand that there's a bigger picture and there's a bigger force, how is it that you could say that when something bad happens, it may be beneficial? And I think the answer to that question is my firm belief that the purpose of being here is to grow. Mm-hmm. We think we come into this world to enjoy, because the way we're wired is we want to joy. We go for that which is pleasurable. We avoid that which is painful. Sometimes if we're driven on a short-term basis, we'll just look at our short-term interests of what's pleasurable in the instant versus in the long term. Yeah. And even if you're not looking at it that way and you're looking long-term, what's in my best long-term interest will act in accordance with what's going to give me long-term pleasure and avoid long-term pain. For example, I work out every day.
Yeah.
It's not enjoyable to work out. Right. It's much more enjoyable to not work out. But I do that because I want to stay healthy and be vibrant for a longer period of time. But I'm still focused on pain and pleasure. It's just the long term.
Yeah.
So, but what life is about growth. And sometimes we get thrown challenges that enable us to grow. And that's the real focus. The focus is the growth. It's not the pain or the pleasure. And it's shifting that paradigm. And when I look back in my life, and I hear this from you, what we basically learn, well, I often will ask people, and I ask you listeners the same question. If you look back at the most transformative events of your life, those situations that helped you become the person you are, I'm posing this question to you.
Yeah.
How many of those were painful and how many of those were pleasurable?
Yeah, I would say that largely they were painful and difficult things, and some of them I've actually mentioned today. But I do believe that what you're saying is true, and that you have to go through the pain. It's part of the journey. It's part of the process. But like I was saying, losing my job, losing my marriage, and those were really painful, difficult things. But I was able to really grow from those things. And sometimes, you need to really be able to step back. And I know this is one of the things that you talk about in your book, is one of the habits is really being able to step back from these things, because these things can be traumatic and painful. And, but like I was saying, to be able to step back and see it from a different perspective, reframe it in your mind. And that's one of the things that, the Rebbe talked about, was positivity. And I know you've spoken about it in this podcast. And it sounds like a glib thing to say, oh, well, just think positive. But the truth is, it's a very powerful and important thing. The Tanya, which we've studied, which is the profound work by Shneur Zalman from the 1700s, which tried to explain the mechanics of the animal and godly soul. He talks a lot about depression as being one of the most deadly things, and it is, and it's an easy thing to fall into, and so what's the remedy for that? And a general positivity is a profound way to inoculate yourself from that. And so I've tried to adopt, and I have to be honest, meeting you over these last 10 years or so has really helped me enormously. I think 10 years ago, I was a much more anxious, nervous, negative person. And I've tried to, reframe how I think in just a more positive way. And I think that that's one of the keys too.
Well, if I hear you correctly, Rob, what you're really saying is that something bad happens and it's painful. And we associate pain with bad.
Yeah.
And we associate pleasure with good. But it's actually, the painful things may actually be very beneficial and open up new doorways and new opportunities. And we don't have to just have faith in this. When you look back on your life, this is one of the things I'm doing, reach back into your life.
Right.
And realize, wow, these are the 5 most transformative events, and 4 of those 5 were incredibly painful.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, I can now have faith that there may be growth that comes out of that
Moving
will
forward.
improve me and make me
Right.
who I am today. So
a good
we're
point.
coming to a close here on our episode 1. I think we have more to discuss, and we will go to a part 2 in a few minutes. We're going to take a little pause here. And so I want to invite my listeners to stay tuned for part 2 with Rob Resnick. And once again, this is Habits of a Whole Heart. I'm Arnie Herz, your host. Rob Resnick has been my guest. And thank you very much for listening. And you can tune in to hmTV to find these episodes. Thank you very much.